Hello, and welcome to today's Micron Valued Partner Seminar, Storage Security and Why Are Self-Encrypting SSDs Not the Norm? I'm Matt Wokus, Strategic Marketing Manager for Micron Storage, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. But before I introduce today's presenters, just a couple of reminders. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A tool, and I'll ask your question to our presenter during the program. Also, if you have to leave before we conclude, and I'm sorry if you do, remember that this webinar is recorded and you can watch it on demand within an hour of the conclusion using the same link you used to log in today. And just by joining us today, you're automatically entered into a drawing for one of our two Crucial by Micron MX200 250 gigabit self-encrypting SSD. So the winners will be notified following the webcast. And with that, let's get started. Today, as part of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we're focusing on data security and self-encrypting SSDs for both notebook computers and enterprise data centers. And we have two presenters with us today. First, we welcome back our returning champion, veteran of Micron Storage webinar presentations, John Tanguy, who is a Senior Technical Marketing Engineer for Micron SSDs. John, welcome back.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
Thank you. And also, new to our webcast, we want to welcome your co-presenter, Dr. Robert Thibadeau, who is an adjunct professor at the Carnegie-Mellon School of Computer Science and is also the chairman and CEO of Bright Plaza, as well as one of the founders of the new Drive Trust Alliance, which we'll be learning more about today. So, Bob, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And I think with that, John, I understand, we're talking about data security, and could you just kind of give us a picture of how prevalent data breaches are and what the risks are to users and companies?
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll dive right into the why we're here part of the conversation, and then talk about what we can do about it. So like I said, let's dive right in. So trends in data security breach. And you can see here, this slide is a little bit dated, going up to 2013, a couple of years ago, but I still feel like it's a valuable pointer to what the trends are and what we're facing as we go forward. So very quickly, I'll mention the data comes from the Open Security Foundation. And what they found was between 2010 and 2013, you had in this left part of the chart here, you show basically a doubling of data breaches that are reported to the Open Security Foundation over that 3-year or 4-year span. And so doubling in that time period obviously is very significant. Now what we want to highlight, of course, is one particular type of data breach, and that has to do with lost and stolen drives, lost and stolen computers and laptops, and that sort of thing. And so highlighted in red or circled in red here is that particular part of the chart. So what you're seeing here is that between 2010 and 2013, actually this is good news. The percentage of those data breaches actually went down from about 20% or 23% or so down to about 12%. So a half in the rate. However, you're still talking about 10 or 12% of the data breaches that occurred of an increasing amount of total data breaches. So even though we're making progress with regard to stolen devices, we've still got a pretty significant problem. So here's more of the why we're here part. Again, between 10 and 20% of all the data breaches that we're going to talk about today actually do involve lost or stolen storage devices to this day. And here's some bullet points that point to the real significance of this issue. Every time there's a corporate data breach, the kinds that you hear about coming from Home Depot and Target and those sorts of things, you're talking about an average amount of damage cost due to that breach of almost $6 million. One of the scary parts of that is, according to our friends at the Ponemon Institute, more than half of that amount for every data breach is actually due to lost business going forward because of that loss of confidence that your customer base has in you. More bullet points. 60% of corporate users have a laptop as their primary computer. And so laptops and important corporate data, sensitive data, is moving about the world like it's never moved before. 40% of corporate employees are bring your own device users. So that brings a whole new level of concern, because you could have variability in the security measures that each individual device is taking. Over 1 billion data records, and updating the data a little bit, over 1 billion data records were reported compromised during 2014 alone. That's from Gemalto. And I will point out that the same data set from Gemalto says that last year, 2013, there were about 500 million records lost. So that's a doubling in 1 year. You can only imagine what's going to happen going forward now that we're in 2015 and on into the future. Not only that, but of course, these lost records of sensitive data that has to be reported, but corporate data, confidential design data, and things like that aren't necessarily a risk to your customers, but can be financially devastating, competitively devastating, that sort of thing. Loss of intellectual property obviously can be as important as losing sensitive customer data. And then, of course, breach laws require, in many cases, that loss of that sensitive customer data be reported publicly. So these are kind of the threat models that we think about with regard to data that can be lost. And I want to point out the particular threat, that we're talking about today. So data in use is simply data that's being used right now by an application or the operating system, susceptible to loss or damage by malware. The TCG Opal and TCG Enterprise drives that we're going to talk about in just a moment don't protect data in use. Encryption is not a substitute for virus protection and firewalls and other data security measures that we're still taking. Data in motion is data that's traversing a network or the internet and is susceptible to hackers. Again, we're not talking about that today. What we are talking about is protecting data at rest, and that's data that is physically stored on a storage device. The device itself is susceptible to physical theft. And TCG Opal and TCG Enterprise compliant drives are effective measures to secure that data at rest for your storage devices. More threats. Another threat model that we want to talk about today is actually data breach at decommission. And what this has to do with is devices that, for whatever reason, we decide we want to retire or repurpose or what have you. It could be as simple as computers that are being used in your enterprise and you want to move on to newer models and donate the old ones to the local library or school. And you can see here that apparently is fraught with danger, even for firms that you may think really should know better. Lockheed Martin deals with sensitive data all the time, and yet they had an encrypted drive that escaped into eBay that contained test launch procedures for one of their ground-to-air missile systems. It was formatted but not securely erased, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The state of New Jersey lost a bunch of computers, or computers that were, I guess I should say, nearly auctioned off, that had very sensitive Social Security and tax information. They made no attempt to erase the data, but by the reports, fortunately, they were able to corral those computers. We hope, at least. And even NASA had some computers that ended up being sold through a secondhand computer store. They had sanitization and disposal procedures and regulations in place, but they weren't followed, potentially because they were very difficult. But they would have to answer that particular problem, or question, rather. So who needs TCG encryption? And, of course, TCG is the Trusted Computing Group, which is the organization that helps standardize and formalize all of these particular measures that we're talking about today. Everybody needs it. Anybody who stores sensitive data on an electronic storage device. So anywhere from the guy here you see in the airport computing on his way to a business trip to the data center has to have it, really should have it. Personal sensitive data and images, tax records, especially these days protected health information, which worldwide now is being protected by law and regulation, and of course financial records and reports. So let's talk about these Opal and Enterprise one at a time real quickly. For client drives, for client computing, mobile computing in particular, we follow the TCG Opal specification. It's a 256-bit hardware encryption engine that's mated with TCG Opal 2 in the current iteration, TCG Opal 2 compliant firmware, and then paired with encryption management software. And a lot of these firms you've probably heard about, WinMagic, Symantec, and Wave, and others. I hate to exclude, but I only have a little bit of space here. Others provide encryption management software, which allows you to manage authentication, passwords, and that sort of thing, and mate that with the encryption key on your drive. You also see this little green symbol here for the open source initiative. I included that because today we really want to talk about open source software management too. I will leave that for Bob to talk about a little bit later today. One final piece of the puzzle is this IEEE 1667 protocol. That's a protocol for the authentication of detachable storage devices. For detachable storage devices, sorry, excuse me. The industry felt like, or parts of the industry felt like that we had the TCG Opal specification, but even though SATA drives are not technically detachable, they certainly can be if you turn enough screws. And so this felt like a good way to add additional protection to the authentication of your storage devices. Microsoft in particular, within BitLocker in Windows 8.x and Windows 10, uses TCG Opal plus the IEEE 1667 protocol to provide what they call eDrive. And that's just another way of using a TCG Opal self-encrypting drive.
So John, for truly a self-encrypting drive, you have to have all four of those elements for client computing?
Actually, that's a really good question, Matt, and the answer is actually no. If you are using your self-encrypting drive through BitLocker, then the answer is yes, but that is a very specific case. And of course, Microsoft is one of the 400-pound gorillas in the room, and so it is very helpful to have all four of those bases covered. On the other hand, many of the other software vendors only require that you be a TCG Opal 2.0 drive. Now, being an eDrive and having the 1667 protocol does not preclude you from using anybody else. It's a little bit of a one-way street there. So that's a really good question. IEEE 1667 is only for Microsoft BitLocker and eDrive.
Gotcha.
Okay, so moving on. So I intentionally and very deliberately put introducing in quotes here. So introducing TCG Enterprise. And the reason I do that is because clearly the TCG Enterprise spec is just as old, if not older, than the TCG Opal spec. But it does have a different, obviously, application. And from our standpoint at Micron, it is new, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So TCG Enterprise is the data security standard which is enterprise-focused that comes from the Trusted Computing Group. What does it do? Again, protects data at rest through encryption, with an encryption key that never leaves the drive, is generated by the SSD itself. And then the key question here is, what is the difference between TCG Enterprise and TCG Opal? Well, there are many, but for our purposes here today, I think the big difference is that TCG Enterprise does not include what's known as pre-boot authentication. It doesn't require a shadow MBR like the Opal specification does. And so that makes it a lot easier to implement in RAIDs and JBODs and other disk arrays that you can think of. So TCG Enterprise we'll touch on a little bit later, but really we're focusing mostly today on TCG Opal. So I mentioned the issues that some people have had with data breaches because of failing to properly erase drives when they're being decommissioned or repurposed, retired, or what have you. So this is where SANITIZE comes in, and SANITIZE is a technical term that is used in both the serial ATA spec as well as SCSI and PCIe data storage protocols. Is a method of completely erasing data, or maybe more specifically, a command to tell the drive to completely erase the targeted data. It's fast, easy, and inexpensive. I put this image here on this slide on purpose because you hear all kinds of stories of people with hard drives who have to go through elaborate means like literally drilling holes through the disks to ensure that the data is completely unreadable. That becomes unnecessary in a world where SANITIZE is supported. So be sure to look for that command to be supported by your drive. In particular, SANITIZE crypto erase is a process where you can rapidly destroy data by simply changing the encryption key. So that 256-bit encryption key is changed at an ATA command, and the data is effectively gone. Even though the bits are still there, they're pretty much unreadable by any means that we know. And then SANITIZE block erase takes that a step further. In our drives in particular, we actually, if we get issued a SANITIZE block erase, we'll go ahead and wipe the encryption key as well. But then we take the additional step of completely zeroing out all the user space on the drive, and including over-provisioned space. So that is an additional level of security in case somehow or other you came up with a quantum computer that actually could break a 256-bit encryption key or some other magical means. You know then the bits are gone. And this process, instead of taking a few seconds, takes maybe a minute or more, even for a terabyte SSD. You may hear of SANITIZE overwrite. SANITIZE overwrite is a command that's intended for HDDs, where they actually do have to overwrite the data. And a little note here, SANITIZE is now accepted as a data purge method from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, in special publication SP 800-88, now in revision 1. It recently went to revision 1 from a draft. And these SANITIZE commands are covered as acceptable means to purge data from storage devices. So real quick, here's my very quick couple of slides of product pitch, and then I'll hand it over. In client, we have a couple of different solutions today. Our Crucial by Micron brand, which is essentially our consumer or retail brand, has the MX200. On the other hand, on the Micron side, for OEMs and integrators, distribution, and that sort of thing, we have the M600. Both are AES 256-bit encrypted TCG Opal 2 drives, and both are currently compatible and tested with Windows 10 BitLocker eDrive. That goes back to Windows 8 as well. Finishing off my little product pitch, encryption in the data center. We want to talk about a couple of products here. The S650DC is soon to be launched within the month of November, and is our enterprise SAS drive for mission-critical database applications. S650DC in particular will be available in a FIPS 140-2 certified edition coming in the spring of 2016. Currently shipping today is our data center SATA drive, the M510DC, really intended for read-intensive cloud and Web.2 type applications. Significant about the M510DC and its sister drive, the M500DC, is that we are currently the only SSD that is self-encrypting drive in the SATA space. So there are no other SATA SSDs that are TCG Enterprise compliant, at least for now. Finally, one final slide, and then, like I said, I'll hand it over. Matt mentioned that this is Cybersecurity Awareness Month here in the United States. We're wrapping it up as we hit the end of October. The hashtag CyberAware on Twitter, you can find a lot of information. StaySafeOnline.org is the organization, the kind of umbrella organization that manages Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And here's a URL on Micron.com, which is essentially our landing page for a lot of these security issues. And that will be growing in the future as we develop more information to share about security. Finally, I'll segue over to Bob and the Drive Trust Alliance, a brand new organization intent on fostering the use of SEDs, particularly notebook applications, but elsewhere as well. The DTA intends to reverse this trend that we're talking about here, where at least 90% of the SSDs sold include encryption capabilities, but only 10% are being used as such. So we're hoping to educate the public that these products are available and out there now. We are a charter sponsoring organization joining here at the launch during this month of October, and so we're really proud to be a part of this alliance. We at Micron have been we're on our 4th generation of self-encrypting drives now, and we're really proud to have worked with Bob for the past few years on our self-encrypting drives with regard to some of his past lives, and proud to be working with him going forward. So with that, Matt, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Terrific. And Bob, welcome, and please take it away.
Okay. So let me give you all a little path into this so you can see where we're headed. There was one of the things that John just said was that there's fairly limited adoption on self-encrypting drives in certain areas, mainly laptop and in some cases mobile. And we'll see how this is rapidly changing and how, in fact, we've had a hugely, fantastically successful introduction to the technology, and there is fantastically successful adoption on self-encrypting drives. It's just not necessarily in a space that most people have seen yet, and I'll explain where we've had the fantastically successful adoption and then the areas that we're trying to basically inform people as to the opportunity for future adoption and so forth and so on. So the Drive Trust Alliance is really established as an internet hub to educate the public, and this is public including everything from consumer to enterprise worldwide, and provide basically an unbiased, extensive reference for all IT departments in the world on SEDs and advantages of them. The providers of SEDs, companies that provide them, providers of SED software, and even individual users who want to know how to acquire and use SEDs. In the first few years of SEDs coming out, lots of individual users couldn't figure out how to buy them. They couldn't figure out how to integrate them and so forth and so on. And so what we're doing is we're trying to provide the butter that makes it easy to acquire this technology, whether you're an individual or a small company or a medium-sized company or a large company and so forth and so on. And so that's our sole purpose in life is really to make all this easy and provide a single hub for all SEDs. So this is our home page, and it's drivetrust.com. And you'll see that we state up front, 1 billion people a day use self-encrypting drive technology. And what I hope to do is absolutely convince you in the next few minutes that this is true. So it is a really interesting technology because you can be using it and never know you're using it and never see any issues. It's unlike a lot of security technologies. It's something that you can integrate into your daily life without even noticing it's going on. So one of the ways that, and John was mentioning this, the SED technology, its fundamental purpose is to help us control data leakage. Today, we're sort of right in the middle of what you could call the age of uncontrolled data leakage, where as human beings, we are working to make sure that data doesn't leak. It's going to take us a few more years, okay, but we are actively, dealing in both the technology, the legal world, and a variety of other places to control data leakage, which is unwanted possession of data by somebody that you didn't want to have access to that data. Okay. Several areas that are sort of interesting is in forensics and digital evidence, you see this sort of young stuff. You'll see cases where courts or policemen are taking data and are not supposed to. The law is still working its way out to make sure that people's privacy is and corporate privacy is correctly protected. Oddly, corporate collections, Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Amazon, all these guys are collecting data on you, and quite honestly, we have to figure out how to control those things too. Okay, and you'll see that in a second. There's a great thing that Snowden released, which is the NSA ANT catalog, which is a catalog of programs that NSA developed to actually spy on corporations and spy on all kinds of people in the world and so forth and so on. And it's a cool catalog. You can Google it. It's not classified anymore because it's been made public. Okay. Ransomware out of Russia is a form of data leakage. Okay, most people don't realize it. It is extremely sophisticated, and at this point, the FBI is basically telling anybody who'll listen that if you're a company and you haven't been ransomed to the tune of $5,000 to $100,000, it's kind of range of the number, you will be. The sophistication of the software is unbelievably good, and self-encrypting drive technology can really help that. Sony, which was attacked by North Korea, nearly brought the company down. Okay, and it was they were exfiltrating data off of Sony, and this is about a year ago, and most of y'all will remember what was going on. The Office of Personnel Management, which is have the secret clearance records on 21 million people. Okay, and evidently all the records, including their clearance process, which involves their families, everybody they've met, every place they've gone in order to get the secret clearance. All of that data is now in possession of China, and that was a huge data leakage problem. So what's interesting about all of those is they're all phishing initiated. They all start by sort of getting you to click on something, and if you click on it, then they get the data. So the joke here is that Google does that all the time. Okay, so they get you to click on something and they collect information on you, and what we're trying to do is make sure that there's some control over this kind of stuff, and we're going to get there. SED drive technology is going to play a major role in it. So let me sort of explain what an SED drive concept is. The idea is that inside of the drive itself, there's a security subsystem that controls functions inside the drive, including special hardware that can encrypt and decrypt data through the data sync and source and the non-volatile storage. But this is a self-protecting device, and so you can't take the device out of whatever you've got it in and put it in something else and read it. You have to know essentially the credentials to gain access to that data, and you'll see that the definition of a self-encrypting drive means that even if you have physical possession of the drive, you can't get at the data. So this is a definition of an SED, and since I'm the inventor, I get to write the definition. Okay. The device uses built-in hardware encryption circuits to write and read data in and out of non-volatile storage. So as the data is written to the storage, non-volatile storage, it's encrypted, and as it's read back, it's decrypted. And all you ever see is a regular storage device that seems to read and write plain text data, but is in fact encrypting it on its way to the non-volatile media. So the second requirement is that there be at least one media encryption key, and this is the key that's encrypting the data on the storage, that's protected by at least one key encryption key. And think password, but think cryptographic password. Okay. And then if one or more key encryption keys have not decrypted the media encryption key, the data that the media encryption key protects is not available. In fact, you can take the drive and you can reverse engineer it to your heart's content, and you'll attempt to read anything off it you want, and you will never see the actual, you'll never have access to the actual media encryption key without the right credentials to get at the data. And those are credentials that only are known outside the drive. There's no hackable version of the credentials inside the drive.
So, Bob.
Yeah.
We actually have a question from the group. Someone's asking, so if my cloud storage provider offers end-to-end encryption solution where I generated my own encrypt key, then how does an SED generate a key that provider has knowledge of?
So that's like 5 questions. So let's go through this a little bit further, and then I'll answer that question. Okay.
Great.
So this is the proof, and I think anybody reading this proof, okay, will agree 1 billion people a day use SEDs, and it's wildly successful. So if you go on drivetrust.com and you do the education menu and SEDs, you'll see this same thing. 100% of all enterprise storage in the world is basically TCG Enterprise. It's crazy, it's true. It's for fast, safe, and effective repurposing and disposal. And essentially all cloud data centers, for example, and this is just one of many examples, 100% of all Google storage is TCG. It's actually TCG Enterprise or TCG Opal. Okay, 100%. Right there, you're getting close to 1 billion people a day. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then 100% of all Facebook, 100% of all Amazon. We're there, guys. People are using self-encrypting drives all the time and don't know it. 100% of all office class printers and copiers in the world use SEDs, TCG SEDs. And that's to protect against theft about what people have printed. We've knocked the number up again, a huge number. 100%, though the two above are approximately 100%, but for the Apple iOS devices, ever since the first iPhone came out, okay, are all self-encrypting storage devices exactly as described. So when you set the password, you're setting the key encryption key, and all the user data, the data at rest until the user logs in, is protected by the self-encrypting property of all Apple iOS devices. And then last week we had a huge event happen. It's going to have a global effect. Google just last week changed the licensing policy on Android, and it now requires all Androids to be SEDs to get the Android license. This is huge. So you know, we're now way beyond 1 billion. Okay. 100% of all SSDs that are currently being built in the office and, not necessarily the consumer space, but some of it is in the consumer space, are essentially Opal. And Micron was one of the first companies to adopt the TCG industry standard SEDs for SSDs. And this is really due to the data sanitization problem for flash. Another number that people are stunned about is approximately 100% of all Western Digital USB hard drives are SEDs. And you may not think that's much, except Western Digital has a 45 or 40 to 50%, depending on which month you're in, global market share in USB hard drives globally. This is a large number of devices. There's a much smaller number of personal hard drives that are Opal or SEDs, and this is the real reason for the DTA is to now that we've had these huge, unbelievably large successes in the enterprise and the invisible world. Now we want to get people to be aware that they can protect all their own stuff. Small companies can, medium companies can, and so forth and so on. And it is true that Microsoft BitLocker natively supports eDrive, which is Opal 2.0 drives of all kinds. And part of what we've done on the BitLocker, on the Drive Trust site, is we're teaching people how to use Opal in BitLocker and so forth and so on. 100% of all the Opal drives supports an alternate way to feed it a key encryption key, which is called a SATA security password. That's in the pre-boot on essentially every laptop out there. And that means that you can actually buy an Opal drive and buy no software. It comes with the laptop, okay? And you can use it right out of the box with no software, and you'll get the same protections. More advanced storage like NVMe and other personal storage devices are being handled by the Storage Work Group right now, and this is an extremely active industry standard work group, and a lot because of all the success it's had that people don't know is really highly successful. So this is something to really take away, is to understand that, contrary to what some people say, SEDs have been wildly successful. You just didn't see it because the technology is wonderfully, the security technology doesn't impact you very much. So this is a slide from TCG Storage Work Group, and it sort of describes the advantages of self-encrypting drives over encrypting outside the drive. And, we can just sort of look through this. In terms of implementation, self-encrypting drives are transparent to the OS, applications, databases. It has automatic scalability. The bottom line is I can take a self-encrypting drive, for example, a USB one, and use it on a Mac or a Windows machine, and I don't need any software on the Mac or the Windows machine to use it. Okay, it's crazy. The rekey expose keys. So the bottom line is the media encryption key never leaves the drive, and all there is the authentication keys. So unlike software encryption, you never need to re-encrypt data. In software, for those of you who've experienced it, you're always facing this 24-hour re-encryption of the data. Should you need to re-encrypt it for one reason or another, it's crazy. Plus, you have to worry about what happened to where the media encryption key is, and whether or not something can steal the media encryption key. In self-encrypting drives, that key never comes out of the drive. In the recovery key, in the recovery of data, the encryption keys don't leave the drive, so there's no need to track and manage them. In the case of encrypting outside, you have to track, manage the escrow encryption keys to maintain interoperability. When you retire the hard drive or the SSD, you simply delete the encryption key and replace it with a new one. And that's a command to the drive, and it says to the drive, forget the old one, get a new one. And drives are great random number machines. They're great at generating wonderfully strong keys. And so once you say that, you've done a sanitization, and the actual time frame for the sanitization is on the order of a microsecond or two. Otherwise, you have to go through a much larger process and so forth and so on. So self-encrypting drives have huge advantages, and those advantages have actually been used. That's the reason you saw those 100%, is that once these companies understood the advantages, they adopted them, okay, because they were clear and understandable and so forth. So there's this ease of use, which is because it's an integral part of the drive electronics, security is added in and not on. There's transparency from the factory already encrypting. The self-encrypting drives are encrypting day one when they're born, and they will never stop encrypting. Now the keys could change, but they never stop encrypting. Performance, they operate at full drive speeds. There's no work slowdown whatsoever. You get the job done. SEDs are mature and time-tested technology. This is not immature technology anymore. We're now well in the world of mature technology. And then scalability, think Google. Google simply scaled, okay? It was not hard. They bought self-encrypting drives. And if you can scale to Google's scale, you can scale, okay? So another little factoid that's interesting about self-encrypting drives on phones, given the Android announcement, and you'll see why Apple adopted this, software encryption by phone in phones reduces the battery life by about 40% on the phone. So if you turn on software encryption for user data on your phone, you'll lose about 40% of the battery life, and that's Nokia research. And that's why phones that require encryption of all user data use SED technology, where there's no measurable impact on battery life. It's crazy. It has everything to do with letting a complicated processor do encryption versus have a few thousand gates do it. And so there's another reason for the SED incredible market success. Now, and this has been flavored through all of this, but you know, I've not been mentioning, is that international laws require data encryption, in particular in financial, healthcare, and personal information privacy. SEDs are easily the lowest total cost of ownership to achieve national and international regulatory compliance. And the companies that have seen this and used it know it, okay? And you know, what we're trying to do in the Drive Trust Alliance is communicate this kind of stuff out to the larger market so that they can challenge us on this. We'll defend it and show them why this is all true. But the time has come to actually move this out into the more general markets from the ones that they started in. So here's a sort of a thing to think about in the future, which is the age of uncontrolled data leakage. There's something called ADAS, which is on modern cars. This is the Advanced Driver Assist Systems. This is the thing that's going to evolve into the automated cars. These modern cars, actually cars today, are collecting data on you all the time, all kinds of data that you might not want disclosed without using your key to start your car. Okay. So if somebody says, if your car's in a parking lot, somebody can't come along, pull memory out of your car, and then, you know, basically threaten you with the data of what they've learned you've been doing. Okay. Every storage device in every car, and there will be many storage devices, need to be industry standard SEDs. So this sort of gives you all a picture of the future of this and why we'll hit multi-billion, not just a billion people a day. So what the Drive Trust Alliance does, so we're business, but we're interested in moving the SED technology forward. And so what we're doing is off of our website, we're providing free education, marketing, public relations services, and so forth. We have an open source. We have the best open source for TCG, Enterprise, and Opal drives. And it's all under a GPL license. You can go and grab it, implement to your heart's content. If you want us to do custom coding services, we'll do that. Okay. And then we have compliance services having to do with these legal things. We're able to make the top legal referrals for what we call silver and above members to the Drive Trust Alliance. And so if you're looking to understand the compliance issues in great detail, or looking for advice on compliance and what you need to do to achieve compliance on a global basis, we have the people that can make the referrals to help you out. So that's sort of it. And so let's go back to that question.
Yes. Oh, Bob, thank you. This is great information. Yeah, let me get here's the question again. So if my cloud storage provider offers an end-to-end encryption solution where I generated my own encryption key, then how does an SED generated key, or how does the SED generated key that the provider has knowledge of?
So the way to think about this, what you're describing is more or less outside the scope of an SED per se. So if you're a security guy, if you're the cloud provider, okay, you may need to encrypt everything, okay. And then if a company is offering a local encryption off of somebody's laptop, okay, that's just simply layering essentially file encryption on top of full disk encryption, okay. And SEDs are the full disk encryption. So a property of AES and most of these, all the encryption techniques, is you can layer one level of protection on top of another, no problem, zero problem, as long as you decrypt in the reverse order you encrypted. It always works, okay. But the point is that as a security guy, we always say encrypt as many times as you can, okay. That makes it like really hard for somebody to get at this stuff, okay. And then so encryption is sort of designed to be layered, and so you can, from a personal point of view, use an SED, but it's I'll give you another example. In the big cloud data centers, the enterprise SEDs are made to work with virtual machines, and so you can have up to 1,024 independent self-encrypting ranges on one of these drives. And so there, if you're a company, you can have a full virtual machine. Let's pick two companies at random. Ford could have a full virtual machine running on the same drive as GM has a full virtual machine, but both of them are independently protecting their stuff, and one can't see what the other guy's writing or reading. This is crazy, but that's how part of the whole use cases around the enterprise self-encrypting drives. But in general, the way to think about self-encrypting drives is they allow you to protect data on your storage device, all the data that's written to it, and all the data that's read back from it. But it is not it's not one of these models that says, I've got the media encryption key on my laptop, and I'm going to pass the media encryption key, or keep the media encryption key on my laptop and expect. So a self-encrypting drive will not give you the encrypted data off of it.
Right. It will decrypt it on the way out if you've got the right key in the first place.
And so we specifically prohibit exposing the encrypted data, and part of the reason is the data leakage problem. There's data that will leak if you expose some of the there are ways that people can get some data off of what you've been storing. Okay. Now it may not do them any good, but we specifically wanted extremely strong protection for the data. So we're really in the business. The self-encrypting drives are really in the business of what if a bad guy gets a hold of the storage? What can he do? He can't get anything. Period.
Right. Okay. We actually, someone did mention as far as another advantage of the hardware encryption versus doing it software is it would not interfere with dedupe or compression in the sense that if it did it software.
Correct. So you can compress your data. And there is no interference with the encryption. You can dedupe. Everything is completely operational. It's all transparent to the encryption that's taking place. Completely no interference with other software.
Okay, I think there's some time for just a few more questions. So if anyone still wants to ask some, please start using the Q&A chat window. But we do have some more coming up here. One here. So how do you see memory technology in the year 2018, the next couple of years, impacting security?
So we obviously believe that self-encrypting drives. You won't be able to name a memory device that doesn't provide this kind of capability, because the capability provided inside the memory device is so much nicer from a TCO, total cost of ownership perspective, than having any of the encryption outside the device. And as devices get less expensive and there's more and more storage in more and more different places like cars and so forth and homes, the default should be all of them should always be self-encrypting. If there's nobody in your house, somebody can come in and rob everything out of your house, all the storage devices you've got in your house, and he's got nothing.
Right.
This is a good idea. This is not a bad idea. If you've got a remote office in, some place in the world, okay, and people come in and raid your office, they'll get the physical devices, but there's no hope for them ever getting the data off of them.
Yeah, Matt, I would add this to that. So obviously Micron and other folks have a lot of new technologies coming out, now and in the next couple of years and in the next few years. And one of the things at Micron we've always stressed is that with regard to the functionality of our storage devices, we really want to be media agnostic. So all these protocols that we deal with, the AES 256-bit encryption engines and the TCG Opal protocols, should, in the main, just not care about what the underlying media type is. And so a lot of people probably know that Micron and Intel are coming out with a new media that's known as 3D Crosspoint over the next, in the near future, I'll just put it that way. And we will be able to use all of these encryption protocols right alongside, our current NAND flash and other media types. So all these things that are coming out new still obviously will need encryption, and the protocols are ready for us to go.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I have another question here. Is there, so that'll be interesting, are there any use cases when an SED should be avoided?
The only thing that you should avoid, or the only situation you should avoid, is if it's legally not allowed. And so there are geographies out in the world where the controlling agencies, I guess I'll put it, just don't want, for example, individual users to be able to encrypt their data. So if it's legally prohibited, then you should avoid it. But otherwise, from a use case standpoint, from a technical use case standpoint, there's really no reason not to use a self-encrypting drive.
Yeah, and we at the Drive Trust Alliance, we believe that once properly educated as to what a self-encrypting drive really is, so it is not a device that can be used as an encryption engine for data that goes over the web, right? You can't use a drive for something called encryption as a service. And as we've been working with these countries that are worried, once they realize you can't use it as encryption as a service, then they have multiple ways that they can, make sure that they can gain access to data from people for legal reasons and so forth and so on. But the benefit to their own business infrastructures is so huge that as we work with these guys, and that's part of the mission of DTA is to get the adoption up, is to inform them and get them to understand, despite what they might think these drives do, once they understand what they really do, then they come back and basically say, yeah, people don't understand. We'll try to explain it and so forth and so on. So.
Okay, we got just time for maybe one more question, maybe two. This is a good one. Do TCG SEDs support verification of data sanitization and media encryption that can be verified by a third party? Otherwise, the end user has to blindly trust that the drive firmware is properly doing what it's supposed to do.
So on the Drive Trust website, last January, I was personally involved, and another person at Bright Plaza, Michael Willett, was personally involved. The last 3 years, we've been working on something called Common Criteria Certification for SEDs. Okay, and as of January, the version 1 protection profile, and it comes out with a independent verification technique that I developed when I was at Seagate. Okay. And it's now made that a global standard for doing exactly that kind of verification. And it's written up. There's a link off of the Drive Trust website to the protection profile that's now public. And it shows you exactly how you do that.
Okay, so third parties can then verify that the drives are doing what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely. And there's a technique for allowing you to have a high degree of confidence that you can check that and a third party can check it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and last question. So to be considered an SED, does the drive require Opal, or just having the AES encryption be considered enough?
So we're if you notice from the definition of SEDs, there was no statement in the definition that it even has to be AES. Okay. Now, you'd be wise to try to make sure it's AES, but numbers of these platforms, for example, the iOS platform is completely proprietary. It works. It is an SED, and it is AES. It happens to be AES, but it doesn't use the TCG interface spec. So they developed their own proprietary spec, and as long as they follow our basic rules, we're not going to sit there and say you're not an SED because you're not using TCG. So the right answer is that what you need transparency. In the case of Apple, every year or in the January timeframe, they publish an extremely detailed security profile for iOS, and you can basically pick it up off the web and see for yourself what they do. And they do a good job. Okay.
I think we're getting up to the top of the hour. So again, Bob and John, thank you very much for your time and participating in this webcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone that's still on the line, remember, if you want to contact John or Bob, just use the email or LinkedIn icons on the speaker bio to connect. Plus, you can also follow all of Micron's flash storage activities using the @MicronStorage on Twitter. And also, be sure to visit drivetrust.com. And again, I want to thank everyone who joined us today, and we'll be drawing the winners for our 2 crucial MX200 self-encrypting drives. You can have this for yourself, for those of you who just joined us live, and we'll notify you directly. So until next time, I'm Matt Wokus, and on behalf of the entire Micron Storage team, thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon.